told you we would be first. I told you that we would figure out a way to get through this. There's a lot of people to thank, but let me start with Governor DeSantis.
UFC president and Trump shill Dana White is in the news, not because of his friendship with an insurrectionist president who tried to overthrow democracy, not at all. It is because of this guy.
He's this old guy who is clearly like a control freak, and I'm the only one that's able to get under his skin. I mean, everyone knows about Dana's coke issue and all the hookers and
Jake Paul. Now, yes, I know what you're thinking. Jake Paul is also a Trump supporter. He's not the greatest, but what he's doing right here is fantastic. After White refused to accept Jake Paul's challenge, White issued a rebuttal, which led to this.
If you steroid test me, then I want to steroid test every one of your fighters. Ooh, you want to do it though, will you?
I use cocaine.
You have been caught with cocaine and hookers every other week. And you think that like with all the money that you have, like billionaire or something, that you would get some Botox because your forehead looks like a motherfucking GPS Google map, like all the lines in it. And you say Masvidal is a pay-per-view superstar. Let's go to his last Instagram post. 5,000 likes or 10,000 likes. Do you realize that my mom, Pam, gets more likes than your pay-per-view superstars? Men lie, women lie, Dana White lies.
So you may be asking, what was the challenge? In a shocker, it appears Jake Paul is a Medicare for all guy, or at least in a certain sport. Paul requested Dana White increase minimum fighter pay per fight to $50,000 because right now, within the UFC, it's $12,000. Guarantee UFC fighters 50% of UFC annual revenues and provide long-term health care to all fighters, citing UFC alums who have publicly said they are suffering from brain damage. Paul gave White 5 days to accept the conditions, with them needing to be implemented by March 31st. So there were a lot of numbers and a lot of figures. Luckily, we're going to go over them right now. Through discovery in a previous antitrust lawsuit, we learned the UFC pays fighters anywhere from 10% to 18% of the sport's total revenue. That is awful. That is dog water. In comparison to other leagues, the NBA pays its players about 50% of league revenue. The NFL is in the high 40s. Major League Baseball's executive director of the Players Association said it's close to 50. The WNBA could see a max split of 50-50 if they hit some targets.
Because you're the bad guy. So what would you put the number at if it's not 8%?
Our numbers line up with sports our size.
Why are you not giving me a number?
Has been here for 16 years.
But
Because what I won't do is give you an inaccurate number.
Right, but you said Lorenzo put a number.
So
what number did he put?
Do your homework. You're a friggin' reporter.
Okay, so
do your homework. Hey, if you're going to ask me that question, do your homework. The numbers were never my thing.
This is how combative White gets on the subject of fighter pay, because he knows, just like the NCAA, just like the WNBA, change is coming. White is just fighting it tooth and nail. Even as the UFC entered a deal with ESPN worth $1.5 billion to exclusively distribute UFC pay-per-view events, the pay structure remains unbalanced. One fighter started a GoFundMe to pay for training expenses, and here's the thing. If it wasn't for a guy named Jake Paul giving a big dono, she wouldn't have had the expenses to train. That, my friend, is the Dana White model.
ESPN, because they're partners, and anytime anybody would say anything that Dana White didn't like at ESPN or anywhere, because he doesn't have any use for journalism, because he wants to do it his way, because he's a Trump dictator guy and he doesn't have any use for unions or fairness or anything else. He just wants his money.
Thus, more fighters are coming out for higher pay. Like Jared Cannonier, who told post-fight announcers, "I'm broke, so I need to fight." It's because White & Co. do not give a damn about those that made him rich. Paul's demands largely centered around fighter pay. He said if White boosted the minimal payout for athletes and increased revenue share, he would enter the UFC's drug testing program under USADA and subject himself to random testing ahead of a one-off UFC fight against Jorge Masvidal, which would absolutely, as we've already shown and Jake Paul has shown, be a cash cow for the UFC. To all UFC fighters, time to take a stand and create value for yourselves and your peers, Paul wrote. You deserve higher pay, you deserve long-term health care, and above all, you deserve freedom. Support each other. I am not your enemy. I am your advocate who selfishly wants to KO a few of you to make some big bank. Paul continued
That ESPN, because they're partners, and anytime anybody would say anything that Dana White didn't like at ESPN or anywhere, because he doesn't have any use for journalism, because he wants to do it his way, because he's a Trump dictator guy and he doesn't have any use for unions or fairness or anything else. He just wants...
Going at White, adding, I said I would fight MMA. I said that I would retire from boxing, and you avoided all of that stuff. It shows that you are in a corner. You're a dog in a corner trying to fight to save his whole company and the embarrassment that I put you through. Everybody sees it, and what you can't accept or love or appreciate is that I'm trying to change the sport forever. You are one of the most selfish, capitalistic mofos that I've ever seen.
It's a little harder to do when your sport has a bit of a monopoly. What many of them are doing is going and fighting the Pauls because it pays for more money going into the circus tent over there.
Everybody else needs you, Dana. I'm the only person who doesn't need you. I don't give a bleep about you, but all these people, all of your fighters, they can't say stuff because you'll just bench them. You've met your maker. I'm not going to stop. The bottom line, Dana, is that you won't add healthcare because you don't give a damn about them, and you're too much of a greedy B-word to pay your minimum fighter more than $12,000 for risking their lives. It's what a janitor makes. You need to pay them $50K, Dana. Stop avoiding my points.
This is the problem, though, when you have such an imbalance of power, when you've got the funds being created by the people in the system who are physically courageous and powerful, but in this instance are powerless. There's a danger to this kind of dictatorship. I don't know that the audience cares, though, as long as they get their pound of meat every time UFC is showing fight.
In closing, will this happen? Absolutely not. No. And Jake knows it. But seeing Paul go after White in this fashion, calling out the UFC and the areas in which they lack, which many reporters and journalists have done in years past, is a nice boost to their reporting. Dana White, like many others in the ruling class, depend on the financial pie keeping them fed while throwing crumbs to those sacrificing their bodies and minds, their long-term health for a minuscule payday. The fact remains, White will not give in until he has to, and that comes from three revenue streams. The first is the fans. If they stop watching the UFC's content on social, do not attend the fights, do not order pay-per-views, nor the pressers, what have you, the UFC's hand will be forced. The second is the fighters. If they cohesively strike, the UFC will panic sign replacements, and the numbers will nosedive, again, forcing their hand. The third is the board members and higher-ups. When they see the impact, negotiations will begin. It's hard to root for a guy like Paul, but pushing the envelope in this fashion against an oligarch like White is quite literally a sight to behold. If you'd like to hear more thought-provoking content like TYT Sports on Facebook and to help in my journey to keep media independent, go to tyt.com/Rick.